Hey, all, EC here, and today I want to talk about Nintendo's greatest game series, and that game series is Donkey Kong. Nintendo has obviously done Donkey Kong quite well over years. I'm going to go over why I think Donkey Kong is the biggest, well, I say biggest, best series that Nintendo has ever created. And I know I'm going to have people in the comments going, oh, what about Zelda? What about Mario? I'll be honest, Donkey Kong has always sort of been the game to me, which obviously kicked it all off. And when you look at Nintendo's history, that makes a lot of sense. Nintendo's first big arcade hit was Donkey Kong. Obviously, it spawned sequels. And actually, if you actually look at the fact that Donkey Kong was first and Mario is a character in the first Donkey Kong game, you actually realize that the Mario games are actually a spin-off of Donkey Kong. So you actually have to thank Donkey Kong for all of, the Mario games that came afterwards, because you even have Donkey Kong in all. Donkey Kong also appears in all of like the Mario sports games and Mario Party, Mario Kart, and whatever. So it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense why, first of all, you got to think that Mario spawned from Donkey Kong, which is something big. And no, I'm not gonna say to anyone watching, take a shot every time I say Donkey Kong in this video, because I think you'll probably be drunk within the next 5 seconds. So let's go over that. So it's the first game that really took off for Nintendo, and it basically had the influence, and it built basically the house for Mario to basically renovate. Now, we also need to factor in the fact that Donkey Kong has actually taken a lot of risks as a series as well. We had the DK Jungle Climber series. We had, obviously, the Mario and Donkey Kong series, where, obviously, I know that's sort of Mario and Donkey Kong. But, it's a fun little series of puzzle sort of games. You also have games like Donkey Konga, which is a really weird game, to be honest. But it's kind of cool that they actually had a rhythm game before Donkey Kong and actually tried with, obviously, the DK barrels, and they tried to actually innovate. You also had Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, which, Wii game, motion controls. It was obviously going to use DK Bongos, it didn't. But it's just kind of interesting that they would do that. And obviously, it was also known as, DK Donkey Kong Jet Race in Europe. You also have, Diddy Kong Racing, which is one of the best racing games ever made. That's a spin-off of Donkey Kong. And obviously, you have the Donkey Kong Country series, which are obviously tough as nails platforming games that people seem to love on the Super Nintendo. It also come back on the Wii and the Wii U and the Switch, have all got games in the series. And I don't know, it's just, to me, it feels like Donkey Kong doesn't get as much love as it really should for Nintendo, especially as, for example, the Donkey Kong anniversary was in 2021. Donkey Kong's first or 40th anniversary of like 40 years since the original arcade game was in 2021. And Nintendo just didn't do anything to promote it. They didn't announce any new products, any new merchandise, any new games. Really, I know people will say, oh, but Donkey Kong Bonanza is out now. Donkey Kong Bonanza is out and it's selling really well. That is true. That is also a really good game. It's the first 3D Donkey Kong platformer since Donkey Kong 64 in 2000. It's nice to actually see Nintendo, try again with Donkey Kong. But the problem I had was obviously the fact that he skipped the 40th anniversary. And for a character that's as iconic as Donkey Kong, I feel like he deserves more love, man. And his franchise literally built Nintendo to what it is today. I know Mario gets a lot of, people give all the praise to Mario Brothers and all of the, Super Mario Brothers and Legend of Zelda and whatever. But Donkey Kong was always there. Donkey Kong was sort of there from day one when it came to Nintendo's gaming ambitions. Well, not day one. Well, I say day one, actually. There was a Game & Watch with Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong 2 was a thing on the Game & Watch, which is weird because there was no other Donkey Kong game called Donkey Kong 2. You had Donkey Kong Jr. It's weird. Okay, and if you were doing the drinking challenge and you're taking the shots every time I say Donkey Kong, you're probably halfway down the road to Blackoutville by now. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Do you think Donkey Kong is the most underrated Nintendo series? Because I feel like they've done so much with Donkey Kong as a character. He's had racing games, he's had puzzle games, he's had obviously rhythm games, he's had obviously platformers. It's kind of insane that Donkey Kong is such a big, such a varied gameography, but then you have he the series is seen as a second tier series. So obviously the main tier is obviously Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon. The second tier series is stuff like Donkey Kong, Kirby, and Metroid. Which, I'll be honest, putting Donkey Kong in the same bracket as Metroid, to me is just come on, Metroid doesn't sell as well as Donkey Kong. Metroid doesn't have as big a history as Donkey Kong, and it's not as innovative. And I'm not trying to diss on Metroid, but similar with Kirby, Donkey Kong was literally the fact that it spawned the Mario series, the fact that it was the game that really birthed Nintendo as a gaming publisher and a gaming developer. Really, I feel like it deserves more love, and I feel like Donkey Kong deserves more love as a franchise and as a character, and should get more, his own standalone movies, his own, more games, more spin-offs, more attempts, more products, more merchandise, because Donkey Kong is just, it's just, he's iconic, and he literally built Nintendo, and obviously all the praise that Donkey Kong should get, has been given to Mario. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to diss the Mario series. I know the Mario series is great, and the Mario series has some great games, but to me it feels like Donkey Kong is just underrated. But let me know what you guys think. If you're new, make sure you drop a follow, like, and comment. If you're new, make sure you give me, follow. You can give me a comment. Do you guys think Donkey Kong is underrated? Let me know in the comments. I've been EC, and I'm signing out. Peace.